Welcome to the podcast, Anita Anello. I'm so delighted to have you. You've got so many great perspectives for moms with homeschooled children who are starting a business and who just have, school age children. I think you have a lot of wisdom. So it's so hard just balancing a business, but balancing education of our children and our
Mhm.
businesses and keeping ourselves intact. We talk about it so much. So, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining me today.
Oh, thanks, Angela. I've so enjoyed even like our pre-show conversation and just getting to know one another. That's sometimes that's part of the funnest part of the
Oh, yeah.
conversation. Yeah.
So, tell us a little bit about your journey of how you went from a software executive to full-time homeschooling and being an entrepreneur.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank you for asking. That's so sweet. So I was a corporate executive for a big global software company. Totally loved my career for many, many years. And then so I have an older stepson, and as my husband and I started having children, I think I was maybe pregnant with our daughter, or maybe she was just born. I don't remember, but it really like early on, right? So infant. And I went to my husband and I was like, "Hey, what do you think about homeschooling?" And he was like, I don't know. Okay. It was one of those kinds of conversation, just tucked it away for later. And then we just kind of went on with life because she would have only been a little bitty baby at that point. But I do remember distinctly in my corporate career what I would travel a lot for work. And before I had kids, I'd get on planes next to young moms and I would look at them and talk to them. And I would be like, "So what do you do? What do you do? What do you do with your kids?" This kind of stuff. And I would talk to these ladies who'd have tears in their eyes because they're traveling, their job was taking them, they're super successful doing amazing things, being a great mother, like they were great moms. And I could tell they were great moms because they'd have tears in their eyes saying like, "Oh, my 2-year-old is at home and I got to go on the road this week. I have a sales call or a consulting call or something like that." And I remember distinctly thinking like, note to self, I don't want to do that when I have kids. Okay. So then we started having kids. And again, we had this conversation about homeschooling. My husband's like, "I don't, okay. I mean, whatever, whatever you say." And my stepson was mainstream school all the way. So it was a total departure from that. But as we started going on the journey, we just started investigating a little bit more what it would look like. So in the early days of homeschooling, when I was still working full time and my husband was working, we started our homeschooling journey by being part of a private school co-op. And so my kids would, and this is all based on your state laws and what you can and cannot do, but my kids would go to school a couple of days a week. And in California, where we're from, we live in Texas now, but in California, the law states that you have to school at home more than you school anywhere else. So kids
Mm.
would go to school 2 days a week and we'd school at home for 3 days. So then we did that. And I tell you what, I had the most amazing ladies come around me as like nannies and help me with the house and all that kind of stuff. Cause I was working a lot of times, maybe a 50 or 60 or maybe 80-hour work week or whatever. And schooling the kids and having a lot of help. And I'd stop a conference call to go over and school somebody and then come back and just I was really good at organizing my schedule so that I could fit the pieces in together. And then we had a support system around us. But then I had the opportunity to retire early. And in that season, we kind of always knew we wanted to just full-time homeschool. Like that was always like the next goal, is
Mm.
that our private school was amazing, but I knew that I knew that I knew, like we always say, people would say like, "Why do you homeschool?" And I was like, "Well, it's just as simple as this. Like, this is where God's called us and we want to be obedient to that." And so that journey looked a little bit different for our household than maybe it does for others. But I just knew that we were going to do that. So at around, let's see, I think fourth grade for my daughter and kindergarten for then our youngest son, we pulled the kids out of the private school co-op and started schooling full time. And it was like my heart just my heart was singing already for a lot of just an amazing life and amazing opportunity to school the kids, but it was like full time, like, this is awesome. So let me pause right there because there's there's a lot just all packed into that.
Yeah. No, I mean, that is it's such an act of bravery to not
Mm,
only kind of go with what you know you're called to do, but when that doesn't look like what everybody else is doing, whether it's starting a business or homeschooling your children,
yeah.
I mean, that's monumental.
Yeah.
It really is. And it's so hard to do. Just like, I mean, this podcast is really for those moms that you would talk to who were tearing up. Like,
Hmm.
there are other ways to share your skills and your abilities with the world and earn an income and be employed, but also parent the way that you want to.
Yeah. That the intentionality for us and our kids was really, it was kind of, it was like one of the top 3 priorities in our household.
Hmm.
Right. And so as my husband and I would talk about some of these things, I mean, we got to a spot where I think I remember saying to my husband one time when I was still working, I was like, hey, by the way, just so you know, and the laws were changing in California. I was like, if we ever like had to sell the house and move to an apartment to homeschool, that's what we're doing. And he'd be like, whoa, wait a minute, wait a minute. Or if the laws shifted and it was ever illegal to homeschool our kids, like, know that we're going to jail for this kind of a thing. So he'd be like, whoa, babe, okay, wait a minute. I don't think we need to worry about that right now. But really, the only reason I share those things is to impress upon you, like, it was that important to us as a family, and it was that
Hmm.
important to me to be the one raising my kids, even though I
Hmm.
had amazing ladies that come and help me. We also had a lot of doubt, right? We had a lot of
Hmm.
doubters around us that would
Hmm.
say things like, "Are you sure?" Maybe, and then when you give up, like at the time I retired from the software industry, my income was significantly higher than my husband's, and so I was the lead breadwinner in our household, and he would look at me like, "Wait a minute, you're gonna do what? You wanna leave the workforce?" So working through that whole process, the big thing there financially was that we created a plan for me to be able to exit.
Hmm.
And that was key for us, like, you know, cleared out all the debt, reorganized our priorities. Like we still traveled a lot. We still did the things that were important to us, but we found different ways to do those. But that was one of those things that financially we were ready for me to leave for a season.
Hmm.
And that helped a tremendous amount because, you know, if you're not ready in your finances to do things like either start a business or homeschool your kids or leave the workforce, or we'll just talk about those 3 things,
Right.
it creates a more stress in your marriage than anyone needs. We'll put it that way.
Mhm. Right, and I don't think either one of us would ever advocate somebody just doing it on a whim and not planning
Yeah.
significantly about, not only your time and your finances, but how it's going to impact all of the stakeholders.
Yeah.
I mean, that's so important. I mean, you're really blessed that your husband was on board and
Yeah.
supportive. I mean, sometimes families don't even have that. They're divided internally.
Yep. That happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had those conversations. Vince would always say to me, he's like, "I trust you. Number one, I trust that
Mm,
you're hearing from God and that we're in this together, but I also trust what you know that you're supposed to be doing." And
right.
so I mean, there's a certain amount of risk. Like I would
Mhm.
say financially, it was not an easy choice. Like
Mhm.
even though we had a plan and God provided for us from like the plan to the unplanned all the way to the miraculous in a very long season of me not working
Mhm.
before I started my business, like
Mhm.
that was challenging and it grew us, it stretched us, it
Right.
matured us, it refined us.
Mhm.
But we kept saying like, okay, but we're on this journey together. The big thing for us too, this was one thing that would all Vince and I would always talk about, the fruit that we would see from our younger kids because of homeschooling, because of spending all of that intentional time. Because let's just be clear, the academics are important, but they're not the
Mhm.
only thing you do when you homeschool. Like that is depending on the age. When they're
Mhm.
really little, it's a small segment of your day. When you're first getting started, you only school for like 60 to 90 minutes. You don't need 5 days a
Yeah.
week for 40 hours or anything like that. So
Mhm.
you do a whole bunch of character development. It's sanctifying to you as the mom or the dad
Mhm.
that's schooling. It's sanctifying to your children. Like there's so much of that that's going on when you school full time.
Mhm.
because you're not shuffling your kids off to somewhere else to be taught and raised. You
Yeah.
are taking on that burden all
Right.
yourself, you
Mhm.
know. And it's not, for us it was mostly amazing, but also, just to be clear, it was also super hard in some seasons,
Right. What
you
were some
know?
of the challenges that you kind of had to face that maybe you didn't anticipate? Like you knew, okay, financially, we're going to have to make some adjustments and, I'm sure time wise.
Yeah.
But what were some of those challenges that you kind of experienced that you didn't expect?
That's a good question, Angela. As I think back, so kind of goes by seasons. The bigger ones were when my kids were really little,
Mm,
and something like somebody would just get a cold, somebody would get sick,
mm,
or I would get sick, right? It's one
mhm,
thing if your little kids are sick and you take care of them. Okay, we know
mhm,
how to do that as moms, but man, if you're down, or just even just real candidly, like, what do you do on those days when you just very first start your period and you're exhausted?
mhm,
So those were some challenges, just
mhm,
the kind of like the scheduling part of
mhm,
being able to say, okay, we have 10 months of a school year, we got to get all this stuff done. So the other part of that is just good planning helped
mhm.
us to overcome. It also created space for us in those moments when somebody was sick, or I just, I mean, hearing all like
Right,
you might have a day where you wake up and you're just like, you guys just need to play because I just need a rest, or I
right,
need a way to just relax and take a bath for an hour so that I just can I
right.
can love on myself so that I could actually love you better. So
Mhm,
those are pretty common when you're in the earlier, younger years of schooling, is like trying to
mhm,
find a little bit of a break,
mhm,
um, trying to recognize that, you're with your kids around the clock, and
mhm,
that just the challenges of around the
mhm.
clock. Like if you're a working parent, think of
Sure.
how many things you have to get done on a Saturday or a Sunday, and then your kids are there, and as opposed to having them be in a schooling environment or something like that. So those are some of the things that come to mind.
Mhm,
Um, I think also for me, spiritually, there was a big battle going on that was really hard for me because I had a lot of fear.
mm,
I
mhm,
had a lot of fear that I was really working through. I had fear for finances. I had been raised in more of a not amazing environment. There was abuse and stuff like that. And so protecting my kids in that and my framework for that. And then occasionally contract work would come up for me, and wrestling through some of those opportunities and having, I don't know, it seemed like there was a season there where every time I'd take some contract work, somebody would get sick or hurt in my house. And I'd be like, what is going on? Like it was always like, Anita, it's not time for you to do that yet, And then the
mhm,
priorities, right? So that was the other thing, is helping to prioritize my day, because when I had the opportunity excuse me, the opportunity to do a little bit of contract work, all of a
mhm,
sudden that would come to the top of the priority list for
mm,
me. Because I'd
mhm,
be like, oh, I got to perform. I got the thing. I got like a little bit of money
mhm,
coming in, da, da, da,
mhm,
all these things. And then I would look at my kids and I talked to my husband. I was like, this is not fair to them.
mm,
Because then all of a sudden my children, who are supposed to be my first full-time job,
mhm.
these are the conversations that I would have in my mind. Nobody else was saying this to me, just to be clear. This
Sure.
is what was going on in my mind, is that, oh my gosh, these guys are getting like, they're like my second priority or my tertiary priority. That's not fair to them.
Mm,
So I would lay priorities down, even things like serving in church, or like great opportunities, good things around us.
mhm,
But when we don't have our priorities in line, again, our household, it's like God, our marriage, our kids, everything else comes after that. On those moments when I would kind of like try to shift away from that, it was always like, oh, come on
mm,
back, Anita. No, we're not going to do that. That's not for right now. There was a
mhm,
lot of that. There was a lot of like, we can do that later.
mhm.
We can get a new car later.
Yeah.
We can
Mhm,
go on another 5-star vacation later. Like those opportunities are going to be there,
mhm.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's really important that you stop and listen to those moments because I know I had moments where I didn't know why everything felt like it was like crazy.
Mhm.
And then you stop and go, oh, okay, I'm not giving them the attention and, my intentional time, like we were talking about. And so, yeah, that's just such an important message that when you're feeling that, just to reevaluate, okay, what are like my priorities and what
Mhm.
am I actually doing? Is it
Yeah.
aligned with those priorities? And usually you'll find that that's what's out of alignment.
Yeah. So I
So,
will say as your
yeah.
kids get older, the
Hmm.
flip side of that is teaching your kids the responsibility. Mom's going to go and work for a little bit.
Right.
You need to work on this. Like,
Right.
I actually love that part of it because what I'm modeling for my children is here, you're old enough now to practice some self-control. So
Hmm.
it's always based on the season that they're in. We're recognizing those things first and foremost and what they're capable of doing because every child's different, right? But
Right.
then also as they grew and I was starting to grow a business, it was like, you know what? These things are really important to me and to our household and to our legacy and our future. I'm going to go spend time doing some of these things. And because I
Hmm.
had poured in so much into my kids, they would turn around and be like, "Mom, go do that."
Hmm.
They could see, they could hear my heart and they could see the look on my face of like, this is important to mom. This is
Hmm.
important to mom and dad. This is important to our household. And
Hmm.
here's why. So we'd talk about it, we'd process it out loud, and I'd be like, go do your assignments that you need to do. I'm going to go over here and do a little bit of work, and then we're going to meet back together. And
Hmm.
that actually gave them more confidence over
Hmm.
the long term to know that I trust you enough to go do your stuff.
Hmm.
And you can see that this is important to me as an adult. And then
Hmm.
therefore, we're going to work this out together.
Right. I love that. So is there like something that kept you all motivated on the especially I think motivation is really hard when you're homeschooling and working at home. Did you have a community that you connected with and that
Yeah.
supported you?
Yes, getting around good people is
Yeah.
because you're not always going to have that. So I will say this, sometimes you have to go and find your people. Sometimes
Yes.
you have to create the environments for your people.
Mhm.
Like at least in my experience in life, that it's not necessarily when you step out of schooling environments, it's not like everybody's going to come to you. They say they will, and it's nothing against them. It's that they now have their think of what full-time school the schedule is like. You got to get up early, you got to go and be somewhere for 40 hours a week, then maybe you do sports on top of that, then maybe church activities, and then, right? Like
Mhm.
folks are so busy. So it's crafting environments that were, for us, it was crafting environments where we could intentionally spend time with people.
Mhm.
So when we were part of our private school co-op and we were doing field trips, and field trips are so fun. And,
Mhm.
like that was our big thing is I always want to do all the heavy academic lifting at home, but I wanted us to get out of the house and experience life. And we
Mm.
did that through field trips, through fun, and through travel. So
Wow.
that's our family's priority over the years. And we did that a lot, right? We did all those things a lot. So when we were in the environment, I kind of watched the model of what it looked like to do field trips and homeschooling co-op and that kind of stuff. And I had great ladies around me that would help. But then I would lean in specifically to there's one lady that was our principal way back when, and she's like, Anita, you're going to be so amazing. When we peeled off from the private school, she was like, I always knew that you would do this. And I
Mhm.
was like, what? Meanwhile, I have so many like family members and other people going, are you crazy? Don't do that. That's
Yeah.
what about socialization? All that kind of
Right.
garbage. Really, let's just
Mhm.
call it what it really is.
Yeah.
Um, so just support, finding
Mhm.
support along the
Mhm.
way. That looked like different things in different seasons. Some of the things we
Mhm.
would do is we would serve as a family in our church. I started co-ops, different co-ops for like
Mhm.
learning. And then that wasn't really our jam because as much as I love teaching, I don't always necessarily want to teach your kids or everybody else's
Right.
kids because, that's just not my thing at all.
Right.
So
Mhm.
then I started a co-op where we would do field trips together, and that was
Mhm.
super fun
Mm. Mhm.
because then the kids would go when it's so much more fun to go and do field trips with your buddies,
Mhm.
right? And
Right.
oh, by the way, as all the homeschooling moms will say, like, okay, my household, we didn't do things like write me a 5-page paper when we're done with the zoo or anything crazy like that. But we actually kind of like enhanced the learning experience just because we
Hmm.
were there with people.
Yeah.
Um, we did move to, like I said earlier, we moved from California down to Texas when my kids were in 4th grade and 8th grade. And that was really, really challenging because we had come from an environment in San Clemente where we had an amazing homeschooling community, an amazing church community, and an amazing neighborhood, and all of these people around us. So we had to start all over and go find it again and go create it again. And
Mm-hmm.
it was a different season. There were a lot of challenges with that, but we had to figure it out. We kind of had to take the step forward and say, okay, we're new to this area, you know,
Hmm.
not new to a lot of things. And we would also like that first year in particular, academically, I was like, you know what? Moving's hard enough. So we're gonna pull this out, pull this out, pull this out, make the learning part of it just not super like heavy hitter.
Hmm.
Um, but we're gonna just go have more. We're gonna do what we need to do. Like we're gonna
Hmm.
focus on the essentials, but then we're just gonna go and have more fun along the way as we meet new people and build new relationships and kind of build up that foundation again.
Hmm. And that is like so in the face of many people in the education system who believe more is quality, like more worksheets, more class
Oh,
time,
yeah,
more. Like if your
yeah.
kid is not cracking, then it's not enough. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, what has been kind of the outcome of that? Have your children thrived in that environment? And are they, I mean, I'm sure they're hitting their educational marks where they're
Yeah,
supposed to be and all of those things. Yeah, I mean, it's so brave and it requires so much of leaving the conditioning that we have behind on
hmm,
so many things, parenting, education, like how we earn income. So,
yeah.
how did your business emerge? Tell us about your business and how you've been able to grow into balancing business and homeschooling.
Yeah. So I started about 5.5 years ago.
Hmm.
I was here. This is kind of, let me just set the stage a little bit. My
Yeah,
kids were getting a little bit older. So the
right.
demands for me as the main teacher were getting less and less and less. And
Hmm.
I was looking around, we had moved and I was looking around and I would say to my husband things like, okay, everybody's schooled. The house is totally clean. I've done all my chores and I'm bored, which
Hmm.
actually in our household bored is like, it's like borderline a bad word because it would drive me crazy when my kids were really little. They'd be like, "Mommy, I'm bored." And I was like, "No, no, 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 we don't
Yeah.
say that." But I genuinely, like, I was actually restless. And that's
Mhm.
what was going on. And so
Mm.
my husband and I would sit down and we'd kind of process it. And he's like, "I don't know what." And I was like, "What do you think I should be doing?" He's like, "I don't know, but I do know that you need to do something. I can see that you need that for yourself."
Mhm. Mhm.
I did know a couple of key things for me. I knew that I wasn't going to go back into the technology field and give that many hours to somebody else because I knew we were going to continue to homeschool. So I had kind of my what do you say, like my non-negotiables. I kind of
Mhm.
had that list in my head of like, this is what I'm not going to do. Okay.
Mm.
I'm also not going to go work a part-time job making $20 an hour just to pay a babysitter. Like that to me was always so stupid. And there's some seemingly great services for moms and part-time working moms, and just the finances never seemed to work out for me for that. I was like, you're going to want me to make a tiny little bit of money and then all I'm going to do is give it to a babysitter? Like that just seems silly.
Mhm.
So I started an Amazon business. That was my first business. Here's what I did know. I knew in my career I was good at a whole bunch of stuff, and I started kind of taking inventory of that. I knew that in my career, the only thing that I actually missed was I had previously owned a business with partners, and I missed being an entrepreneur.
Mm.
And so that kind of started the journey. So like I said, I started this Amazon business. I was doing all sorts of different sourcing models, having kind of fun, building confidence, learning. Like the Amazon world it's a little bit, it's a lot. It's a lot to
Mhm.
take in. There's a
Mhm.
steep learning curve on working with Amazon in your own business. Tried that for a couple of years. COVID hit, and in the midst of COVID, I had product in warehouses, but the whole supply chain all around the world was completely shut down. So I sold off my product. And here's what was interesting to me, Angela. I consider myself to be a little bit more of like an introverted personality. Like I get my energy from being by myself. But
Mhm.
then during COVID, when we were not out socializing with anybody, I was like, oh my gosh, I kind of miss people. Like it was like weird to me to even think this and say this because let me just be clear, I had never had those thoughts had never crossed my mind before.
Uh-huh.
Whereas like I said, like my husband's super uber social, he likes the social butterfly. I'm like the polar opposite. Like I
Mhm.
love to talk to people one-on-one and have more intimate conversations, but yeah, it would just, so anyway, I digress. In the midst of that, kind of like that transition phase, I had started reading some different books around coaching.
Mhm.
One specifically that stood out to me is 48 Days to Work You Love by Dan Miller, who actually just recently passed several months ago. Bless his family in that. And so I got to know Dan and his daughter, Ashley, personally. I was in their community. And just as I started going through the process of going through his book, I became a certified facilitator of his material. And as I started digging in deeper, I was like, wait a minute, coaching? Like I've kind of been doing this for a lot of years, like maybe 20 plus years. I've been coaching people. I've been schooling people. I've been coaching people. I've been talking to all these. So I started taking inventory a
Mhm.
little bit more deeply about like, oh, this is kind of cool. Then I started practicing a little bit. Like I said, I was a certified facilitator of the 48 days material. And so I'd walk men and women through, mostly my sweet spot is women, but I'd walk these
Mhm.
clients through the process of discovering for themselves what and watching like, oh my gosh, this is possible. I can step into things. And I was starting to see success.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh my gosh, this is kind of like the thing. And so I started investing in myself a little bit more. I started investing in more high level coaches. I started investing in bigger masterminds. I started investing in just getting myself and my mindset in other environments where I could stretch and grow and cultivate like, who's my sweet spot audience? What's my offer? How am I going to go after them? What am I going to do? You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
what do I stand for? And I
Mhm.
kept kind of coming back to this is like, God, this is my framework is always God. And whoever's listening, if you have a different framework, that's totally fine. It's okay. I'm just going to be where I'm at. You can be where you're at. But I remember thinking like, God, I want to glorify you in everything I do.
Mhm.
And I know I think that if I go back in the corporate environment, I'm not going to be able to always do that with my words because I'm going to have to watch that. Right.
Mhm.
And especially we had like COVID, then we had like racial insurrection, and now we have gender
Mhm.
craziness insurrection going on. And I was like, ooh, I love every person. And then yet all these I'll put them in the category of all these like confusing thoughts that are going on in our society right now. I was like, where do I fit into all that, Lord? And so I want to be able to bless and honor people the way that God has made them. And so I thought, okay, let's keep going on the coaching business, right?
Mhm.
Because then I have the ability, I have full freedom to be able to bless and honor people and speak my mind because it's my business.
Mhm.
Right? So I would go on walks and I'd have these conversations with the Lord and I'd pray and I'd seek some wisdom all around me. And I just would start like sketching out what the next steps look like in this season.
Mhm.
Um, in that, I would say a couple years ago, we had radical situation happen. So my business was going okay. I can't say it was necessarily financially covering the needs of our household. My husband was doing that at that time. But then we had a situation where we went from like a marriage upset to a medical crisis that ended up with one of my family members in the hospital and job loss, all within like a 6-week window.
Oh.
And it felt like life just kind of came crashing down.
Mhm.
But in that, I was like, no, no, no. Lord, so here, like, let me set the stage. So my husband's in the hospital. He loses a job while he's in the hospital, our
Mhm.
primary source of income. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to figure this out. Like, this is go time for me. I'm
Mhm.
actually really good at those kinds of pressure situations. So I remember looking at my kids at that time and thinking, I'm not exactly sure everything that's going to happen, but I do know that we're going to be okay no matter what. I know
Mhm.
that God's got us and we're going to be okay, and I will figure this out.
Mhm.
Do you know, because I already had the habit of showing up like that as a person, my kids knew me to be a mom of integrity. And when mom says something, man, it gets done, whatever it is. So
Mhm.
when I said that statement, Angela, to my children, their whole countenance on their face changed, one from worry, I don't know what's going to happen, to just peace.
Mhm.
And I was like, I'm going to figure this out. No matter
Mhm.
what, I'm going to figure this out.
Right.
And so I really started to go after diving in more to my business, do more outreach. I got connected to some friends I had known for like the last 20 years in my industry, and got connected to a couple of clients. And do you know, our income, it like did a hockey stick. I mean, it really took off. It felt like overnight, but it was, I mean, I went from doing okay in the business to making 4 times my old healthy corporate salary, working part-time, still homeschooling my kids, and just going like crazy, and really serving people in the way that God's designed me to serve clients, in that being able to use that skill set and reapply it
Mhm.
in a different way. And that's what I love being able to help other women do, is that I know that we have these skills. And when
Mhm.
we're in the corporate space, how do we reapply those in a different way so that
Mhm.
you can have your time back and you can have money freedom to be able to go and do some of these amazing things that God's called you to do. And, you know, like even just intentionally raise your own kids. That's an
Right.
amazing privilege and an amazing honor. And
Mhm.
it's such a great opportunity. There's never been a better time for women in history to go and build businesses than right now today. And
Yeah.
it's have this great little window of time that is
Mhm.
right upon us to be able to
It
do these
is.
things. So cool.
It's very exciting. And so now you teach others on how to start and grow their businesses and have the success that you did.
Yeah, my sweet spot now is to be able to help other entrepreneurs have 6 and 7 figure years, months, or days, whatever they choose.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And so I know we're coming up a little bit against time. You've shared so much wisdom and so many great little nuggets from your story that, I mean, I'm thinking, and I know I run into this, I think some people are going to listen to this and go, well, that's great for Anita,
Hmm.
but there is no way that I would be able to do the homeschooling and the business and juggle it all and deal with my kids all day. And so what do you say to those people?
Okay, let me kind of break down a couple of things. Number one, if you're thinking that you're going to take what your kids do in the school environment in that many hours and then try to reapply that to your household, you're going to stay in a state of overwhelm. And that's not what homeschooling is like. Okay.
Mm,
So let's just kind of get a baseline here.
mhm,
So I don't have to take, when my kid goes to a school with 30 other kids in a room, that kind of schooling environment is difficult. If you try to replicate it at your home, you don't need all that. You don't need, it doesn't take that much time to school your kids at home. Now, we are big advocates of our household, like as homeschoolers, be
mhm,
responsible, be people of integrity, get your kids
mhm,
ready for college or whatever their next responsible adult
mhm,
step is. Don't
mhm,
be the kind of people that just bow out and just say, well, I don't know, my kids, yeah, don't do that. Like
mhm,
be the kind of people that show up and get things done. My daughter just graduated high school last year with honors. Like she's ready for her next step as an individual in her
mhm,
academically. She's ready in her character. She's ready in her maturity. She works in my business, like, and going on and pursuing the things that God's called her to do. Right. And
mhm,
so be ready and do those kinds of things. But when it
mhm,
comes to like next steps, so number one, it's not as difficult as you might think. Number two, and I'm super practical and tactical, so I'm just going to give you a quick little list. So number
Mhm.
one, it's not as hard as you think. Number two, find great resources that work for you and your family. There's amazing curriculum out there these days, but you don't have to do all of it. Don't try to do that. And you got to find some things that work for you. There's a lady by the name of Kathy Duffy. I think her website is kathyduffy.com, and I'm pretty sure she's Kathy with a C.
Mhm.
She has a phenomenal tool where you can identify your kids' learning abilities and your teaching style and lay those on top of one another. And then you can write out I still even have it on my wall over here, whatever your
Mhm.
family mission statement is. That
Mhm.
was key for us in the early days because I wanted to know where we were going to end up and then be able to
Mhm.
create a plan to do that. The
Right.
other thing is have some planning. Have some
Mhm.
good planning on your
Yeah.
side. And if you need help, reach out to people. You could reach out to me. I'm sure you could reach
Mhm.
out to Angela. Like, reach out to people you know, like, and trust
Right.
that can give you some things. Then the next thing is just try it. Because you
Mhm.
don't have to. Here's the thing. I don't know why people do this. I assume it's well intended. I just don't understand it. I'll put it that way. When my kids were kindergartens and junior K and kindergarten, people would ask us all the time, well, what are you going to do in high school? And I'd be like, well, I don't know. She's 4. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. She's 5. I don't know. She's 8. Like,
Right.
I just, don't worry about that kind of question.
Mhm.
Just take the next step.
Mhm.
I know dozens of families who have said, we homeschool for a season, then we go back and do something else for a season, then we do another season. So the best advice that a friend of mine gave me a long time ago, she's like, Anita, don't worry about all that. Just take it 1 year at a time, and God will lead
Mhm.
you 1 year at a time. You don't have to worry about all those other years. You'll go and do the things that you're supposed to do at that time. So it's really
Mhm.
just as simple like decide what you want to do.
Mhm.
So that's probably step point 5 all the way back at the beginning. Just decide.
Yeah.
And then the resources will come to you. You'll figure it out along the way. Don't hem and haw for years about it. I've talked to so many moms over the
Yes.
years. They're like, oh, I've been wrestling with this and, fighting with God and I don't know, arguing with my husband or what. I mean, I've met a lot of dads,
Mhm.
by the way, who are like, oh, I wish my wife would homeschool our kids. It would be so amazing. And I'm thinking,
Mhm.
that's kind of like great environment right there.
Right.
Sometimes, just a little side note, sometimes the reason we don't want to school is because of our own
Yes.
self-centered focus. I mean this with all love.
Mhm.
I've got something going inside of me that's telling me that I need more of me time.
Mhm.
I'm just going to say that's not true. You can totally do this.
Mhm.
So just know and be encouraged that you can and decide and then
Mhm.
go and find the steps. There are incredible homeschooling conferences. We're getting ready to go
Right.
into like homeschooling conference season that happens in the summertime. Like I've been a guest speaker at some of these.
Mhm.
They're all around. So there's like the Great Homeschooling Conference. I don't know, they're all the names. Just
Mhm.
Google what you
Mhm.
need. We've used some phenomenal curriculum over the years. We love My Father's World, and then there's some great math programs, and excellence in writing is phenomenal. Those are like 3. And so Sax and Math, My Father's
Mhm.
World, and excellence in writing. Those are some of the top notch curriculums that are out there to teach your kids.
Mhm.
Um, I mean, I don't know. There's some resources right there. I just saved you
Yeah.
several hours of research yourself.
Right. So, for anybody listening with school-aged kids, this episode is coming out at a time when we're transitioning to the new school year. Do
Yeah.
you have any advice? That's it usually takes me by surprise. I'm like, why does this surprise me? I've been through this, I don't know how many times, but it's such a tough it's time of year for families, I think. Do you have any advice for kind of preparing and making it a more successful transition?
You bet. Yeah, because we did this a lot. There were some real practical things that I would
Hmm.
do. Like I would start getting my kids more on a bedtime routine a couple
Yeah.
weeks ahead. So
Hmm.
that was key because, in the summertime, everybody kind of just all those things kind of fall off, which they should. let me just, for us in our household, I believe that you should not school in the summertime, that you should have full downtime. That's what's worked for us. Now,
Mhm.
it doesn't mean my kids have never in their lives taken a class in the summer. Sometimes
Mhm.
we had to, we chose to do that. I'll put it that way.
Mhm.
But so shifting the bedtime routine early on, like, a couple of weeks ahead, just a little bit at a time, so they're starting to get back into the rhythm.
Mhm.
I would also start doing some reading so they
Mhm.
get back into the rhythm of sitting down. Now my kids are avid readers, so they would read all summer long anyway, but and not like, because the school year, you learn after a lot of years of schooling, the school year is really, really long.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
I'm not advocating, personally, I'm not advocating like start math early and just start
Mm.
hammering that and start,
Mhm.
no, it's more like light activities that start to build a rhythm of a schedule,
Mhm. Mhm.
a bedtime schedule, a wake up schedule, a chores schedule, a downtime schedule, a playtime schedule. And so
Mhm.
starting that rhythm of what the schedule, because you can plug in the different activities however you want.
Right. Yeah.
you know? So starting kind of like getting in the mode of like, okay, we're going to do a little schedule. The other
Mhm.
thing that we would do is we wouldn't start out really hard hitting.
Right.
So I'd layer in, depending on the different curriculums, and I'd kind of map everything out ahead of time. I'd take a couple of days and get it all straight in my mind first. And I'd be like, okay, we're
Mhm.
starting, math is going to be the longest. So we're going to start math in this week. And then we'd wait a week or so and we kind of see what we'd be doing is we like folding in the activities. A
Mhm.
lot of homeschooling curriculum does not start heavy hitter right up front.
I
It
don't think they do that in public school
No, they
either.
totally don't. As
Yeah.
you're absolutely right, they don't. They do a lot of the first
Yeah.
3 or 4 weeks are all
Mhm.
remedial from
Yeah.
last year,
Mhm.
and then you go forward from there. So folding in academic
Mhm.
activities, that made it a little bit easier on the kids because then they're kind of like, "But I really want to be outside swimming in the pool,
Mhm.
mom." And I'm like, "I know. Do an hour's worth of work and then go swim."
Right.
Right?
Mhm.
So when we moved down to Texas where it is still what we call stupid hot in August, and my kids have like swam all summer long and they're kind of like, I'm done swimming. Okay, no problem. Come inside the AC, settle down a little bit. Let's do a little bit of work, fold some
Mhm.
activities in, and then we go out and play again and, rinse and
Mhm.
repeat over and over again. When we lived at the beach in San Clemente, we would actually just school at the beach
Yeah.
because then we were like in an environment that we loved. We were still doing these steps, but we would, and then in the middle, oh, here's the worst. In the middle of like, depending on where you are in the country, sometimes January or February can be like the hardest month to school all around. My husband would always say, be like, babe, I can set my watch to you when I know exactly when it's February and I don't have to look at calendar. And I'd be like, why? He's like, because you have a baby meltdown every February. Where you're like, everybody's going back to private school. I'm going back to work. This is crazy. I'd get all, it would be bad because they didn't, at that time of the year, you're like in the halfway mark. Nobody
Mhm.
really wants to school. It's the middle of winter. It's kind of crummy out wherever you live
Mhm.
and you're just tired.
Right.
So I had a sweet girlfriend who would say like, Anita, how about you just take a extra week off in February? And I was like, are you kidding? I can do that.
Light
So
bulb.
yeah, we laughed and I was like, oh, that's going in our school year every year after
Yeah.
that. So we have been doing that. So
Mhm.
you hear what I'm saying? It's the schedule, but it's also a flexible schedule that
Mhm.
accommodates for life, to
Mhm.
have fun, like enjoy the process. You're never going to have
Mhm.
this time with your kids in this
Yeah.
situations ever again.
Mhm.
Like, don't lose the opportunity just for more stuff, more
Right.
activities, more work,
Right.
more work. Like, really recognize. So, this is what I wish I had been able to lean into when I was a little bit younger. Really embracing the seasons that we were in. I felt like I did the best I could in those
Mhm.
seasons to really
Mhm.
embrace that. But now that I'm a little bit older and I have teenagers in the house, I look back and I go, but not in a shameful way or anything like that, or I don't condemn myself, but I think, Yeah, I did have older ladies who would say, Anita, enjoy the seasons because each
Mhm.
season is different and each season has its own gifts and
Mhm.
each season is special. And I'm like, okay, I can see that a little bit better now. So now I'm like, oh my gosh, we're in this amazing season. We're
Mhm.
learning, teaching another teenager to drive and,
Uh,
just do the like, it's
yeah.
so fun, Angela. Like each season is so amazing with your
Yeah.
kids.
Mhm.
And you get this tiny, so here was the big deal. This was like the big idea when we first started homeschooling. I worked in the corporate world. My husband worked. My stepson was in public school, and I had this picture. I was like, what is our family life going to look like if all of us are leading all these little siloed lives? Like, where's our connection time going to be? Is it
Mhm.
just going to be for a couple hours in the evening and on the weekend? I
Mhm.
was like, I can't handle that. That's not, no, that's a no for me.
Mhm.
And then I got this picture of like, hey, Anita, you only have like these 18-ish years with your kids.
Yeah.
What are you going to do with it?
Mhm.
And then I was like, oh, homeschooling. It's no matter what. We were like, we were going to figure this out. So to bring it back full circle, like because I had that picture in my mind of we only have this short little season with these darlings
Mhm.
to grow them up and we have such a close relationship with our younger ones especially. It's so precious. And even for my older stepson, he's my own. I love him like my own. He has commented over the years of like, what you guys have modeled, I want to be able to do that in my own family. And what a blessing it is that you guys had that time that you could spend with not just the little kids, but with me. And like
Yeah.
everybody flourished in our household because of the time that we've spent together. And like our hearts are good. Our hearts are
Right.
healthy. We're healthy individuals. We have high emotional intelligence. Like we good we know how to communicate really well,
Mhm.
and it's because we spent a lot of time together just
Mhm.
processing like the good days, the bad days. I don't know, when
Right.
your kids come home and like, mommy, somebody was mean to me at school today. Oh my gosh. In my mind, I'm like, I really want to beat them up. But no, let's just talk about it. Let's talk about it, allow you to process it,
Right.
acknowledge those emotions, let that go. Like that stuff takes more time than anything. But it's the
Does.
opportunities to take the time to really talk through what's going on in our heads and our hearts as we're growing
Right.
up. And
Yeah.
that there's nothing more worthwhile on the planet than that, doing that for your kids.
Yeah, and it's like if you don't move on that opportunity or what you're called to do, you can have a lot of regrets, and that's just not a regret that you have to live with.
Yeah.
And, I know we're coming up against time, but I'd love to ask what takeaway or takeaways you'd love to leave with listeners who are listening to this episode today.
Yeah, you know what? Don't worry where you've been. Just decide what you want to do next.
Yeah,
That's it. There's no shame, there's no condemnation, there's no guilt of
right.
anything you've done up to this point. For every mom, especially that's listening, if your mama's heart is crying out to do something different, we just want to encourage you. Angela and I together, we want to encourage you today. Just take the next right step of integrity that you know that God's calling you to do. But there's no guilt for anything that you've done so far. Like just know that you're loved, you're cared for, you're held, your kids are going to be okay. Just we just want to encourage you to take the next step because we believe
Mhm.
in you and we know that you can do this and you have support right here.
Right. That's such a key thing is you don't have to do it by yourself. And
Mhm.
actually, I don't recommend you do it by yourself because
No.
we kind of being a parent can be isolating, homeschooling can be isolating, online businesses can be isolating.
Oh yeah.
So there are so many people that can be invested in your dreams and help you facilitate what it is that's going to work best for you. So I love that. I'm sure listeners are going to want to connect with you and learn more about your work. So where can listeners connect with you? And I know you have some resources as well. Feel free to mention those.
Yeah, yeah. So I do have probably the best way is you can just look me up on social media, just Anita Anello. The
Mhm.
name of my business is The Ripple Effect, and effect is spelled with an A. Um, I have this new offer where I help entrepreneurs that want to be able to build those 6 and 7 figure businesses. So if that's something that you're interested in, and here's my thing, I believe that we are designed, especially as working moms and business owners. I think that business should be We should go make a whole bunch of money, have a whole lot of fun, and not work that much. Because I think there's so much freedom in all of that. If that's something in particular that you are genuinely interested in, I would ask that you just reach out to me directly. So I'm going to give you my personal email address, and that is Anita@therrippleeffect.net. We'll make sure to put it in the show
Yeah.
notes as well, so Angela will have that. But yeah, just reach out and just know, from the time that we're recording this to the time you're listening, just know that we're going to be praying for you and we're going to be encouraging you along the way, because we know that you can do this.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll leave all of those links in the show notes. And, you just mentioned so many things too that are gonna probably trigger people. Like, am I worthy to earn 6 and 7 figures? And
Mhm.
is it easy to run a business? And do I have to work really hard? And all of those answers, you don't have to work that hard. It
Yeah.
can be easy. You are inherently worthy. So, I know that's going to hit people because I deal with those people too, who are like,
Yeah.
what? No,
Yes.
that's for other people.
I
So I
know.
love that you mentioned that too. Thank you so much, Anita, for your time and sharing your experience and your wisdom and all those little nuggets.
Yeah, you bet. And Angela, I just want to honor you before we go and thank you. Just genuinely, I am so grateful to meet you today and to see what you're doing and the way that you're encouraging other women and other moms and homeschoolers, champion in your own
Yeah.
household, and just really like you're just shifting the bloodline in what you're doing, not only for your own family, but for that's listening. So
Oh,
amazing, amazing job. Thank you so much
thank
for who
you.
you are.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what have I do was kind of born out of being in a situation where I had to homeschool my daughter for a short period of time.
Yeah,
And I knew I had no other choice. And then my business kind of came out of that too as a military spouse and
yeah,
not having opportunities. I had to create my own. And so
right.
I think we're both giving women permission to follow their callings and create their own opportunities. So thank
Yeah,
you, Anita. That means so
so
much.
good. Oh, you're so welcome.
Thanks.